What is going on, everybody? Hello, hello, hello. What is going on? How you all doing? How's everybody doing? You guys like the chapter? This turned out to be a really fucking good backstory, isn't it? All right. No, I was on time. Do we got to do this shit again? Here, hold on. Let's do this. Here we go. All right, look. 57 seconds, 58 seconds, 59 seconds. I've been live for 1 minute and 1 second, which means I'm good. I'm in the clear. We're in the clear. All right. Behenor, thanks a lot. Harold might be a good politician, but a questionable father. When he's off doing diplomacy, his son is being abused and scapegoated, causing Loki to lash out and eventually wanting to die. Yeah, Harold's not the best father. He's having to do a lot, right? He's having to run a kingdom. Keep in mind, Harold has to essentially play father for all of Elbaf, right? He's having to play father for all of Elbaf. That's kind of hard, you know? But he should have found somebody better to care for Loki. I don't think that would have been the hardest thing in the world, right? Should have found somebody better to care for Loki. Honestly, I feel like fucking, maybe it'd be weird to ask his other wife to do it. Not other wife, Ida to do it. That might have been weird. I don't know. Yeah, Harold, he's a great king, but just not an attentive father. He gave Loki love, but not the amount of love that Loki needed, you know? Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Duck 20, thanks for the 5. Rocks definitely has Buggy's fruit with that mountain slice. That would be... If Rocks has the chop fruit, that would be amazing. Who thinks Rocks is also Buggy's father? Because that's possible. Carnage says Rocks look better as a silhouette, can't lie. Rocks did look... he looked more traditionally badass as a silhouette, but we're getting more character out of him here. Oda had to portray him as that in the silhouette because in the silhouette, you're hyping up the myth of Rock. You just want the reader to feel excited, right? You want the reader to feel like, oh, damn, there was this really fucking bad dude that was next level, Roger's first and greatest enemy. You're not getting the full character right then, so you just need the image of this sinister legend, right? So Oda warped the silhouette a little bit to play to that need, but the actual character that it seems like Oda always had in mind was more so a Blackbeard-esque figure, which is obviously very evil, but not traditionally badass looking, right? So yeah, the silhouette did look more badass, but that it just had to play to the need at the time, right? I think it's kind of similar to how Loki, it's the reverse in that Loki, the giant, the prince of the giants or whatever. I think Oda was not at that, when we first saw the silhouette of Loki way back, Oda was not trying to hype up Loki just then, because it would be a little bit you're not trying to get the reader hooked on whoa, this is a crazy badass design, who is this guy, and then everybody's obsessing about Loki, right? You're trying to keep the story more present, and Loki's supposed to be a surprise down the line, right? It's supposed to be a surprise that Loki's this really super powerful, strong, ancient giant warrior. So Oda went with a totally neutered design for that. Versus for Rocks, he kind of did the opposite, where you want the reader, you want to start building the image of this crazy powerful pirate way in advance, right? Ravel to Roger. How did I like the chapter? I love the chapter. I'm excited very, very much from this chapter because it's doing good stuff for Loki's character, but at the same time, it seems like we're gonna get a lot of the lore of the world woven into all of this. So it's gonna be one of those type of flashbacks, you know? Oh, JWP, thanks for gifting 5 memberships. I'm sorry I missed this. Holy shit. Thank you, man. It seems you like the chapter. I hope you've been enjoying the content lately. Thanks a lot, JWP. I really, really appreciate it. The people in chat appreciate it as well. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. Everybody in chat, say thanks to JWP for kicking off the stream with this shit. Yeah, Roxy Xebec bruh says JWP. Okay, yeah. I think we're all pretty hyped about that. Cooper064 says, what the hell is that shirt? I don't even know what you're talking about, man. Meek, thanks for the 5. Hey, how'd you like the chapter? I mean, I think I answered this. Yeah, I did really, really love the chapter. I'm very excited for this flashback. I feel like we're going to get a good amount of Rocks lore in here, but not God Valley. I don't think that's happening. I think that's too off base. That's too separate from everything that's happening in the modern day. It's also interesting. Like, Loki's a great character. The Giants aging is one of the smartest moves Oda could have done and figured out in advance, like their slower growth rate, because it allows so much to be covered over the course of like a backstory like this, while still feeling like the events are modern to the Giants today, if that makes sense. Because for them it wasn't that long ago, but for the lifespan of humans, all of this did, like, we're looking back generations and generations, right? Like, Rocks was 50, 60 years ago, right? And then Roger's rise, and then the Great Age of Pirates. All of this takes place over a very long lifespan. But with playing with the Giants' ages like this and their perception of time, you can have Loki basically as a child during this period, and then an adult now with, for him, not that much time having passed, but in reality, like, he's been through generations and generations of humans, right? Like, similar with Harold. Titanium Dragon, thanks for the 5. Seems like Blackbeard wants to get revenge for his dad. Also, Buggy could still be Rox's son. When the colors drop, his hair will be blue to contrast Roger's red. Yeah, it'd be kind of crazy because it's like, that means that Blackbeard has 2 sisters and Buggy's his brother. And when the Whitebeard pirates faced off against the Roger pirates, let me look at that little interaction again. Chapter 966. I don't want to share chapters on screen or anything, but here we go. Yeah. Hold on. So the matchup between the Blackbeard pirates and the red-haired pirates. Yeah, you got Buggy staring across at Blackbeard. You see that guy wearing the hat, Shanks? Shanks says, yeah. I heard he didn't sleep a wink during the ceasefire. They say he's never slept in his life. That's not the point. Don't you get it? He's a monster. Yeah, I wonder if there's something there. It's just that it's stated that Blackbeard has 2 sisters. So it'd be 2 sisters plus Buggy then, right? How old's Buggy? Sean Easton, good to see you after a bit. Thanks for the 5. Loving these Loki and Sanji inversions. Loki's mother, Sanji's dad. Loki's unkillable, Sanji was weak. Loki gave up on love while Sanji embraced it. Yeah, I saw that going around on Twitter. I think that's some good points. Definitely some good points. I wonder if, because I believe that this arc is supposed to be important for Sanji as well, considering how much Gaban is being played up in this arc. Obviously, the Conqueror's Haki discussions. So I'm curious what the direction for all 3 of the monster trio is. I think it's supposed to be a big arc for all the Strats, but I like that there's some parallels, a lot of parallels going on for Sanji here. Angry Chop, thanks for the 2. Any thoughts on it being Nepo piece allegations? I mean, I'm just never a fan of that. It's just so fucking prominent in manga. I remember, like, in Naruto, things reached a point where the only strong character in existence, I think, who wasn't, like, a Nepo baby of, like, some specific lineage was, I think, Minato. I might be wrong, but I think we kind of got to a point like that. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick, because we're almost there. I don't like it. I think it gets boring at a... How to explain this? It's not boring. It's just like... So One Piece is like a lot about it is will passed down through generations, right? So it fits the ideas of the story. I think I just dislike it more for what it does for the modern day characters, if that makes sense. Because sometimes you just like the idea of a character, um, like for example Zoro, right? I think Zoro's like for the longest time I thought Zoro was a really cool character, just like partly because like he's not a D tribe member, not the son of anyone special or something like that. He's literally just a kid from nowhere in East Blue who decided that he wanted to become the world's strongest swordsman. He decided that before, by the way, before Quina. Quina just helped added an extra layer to his drive, but he just decided one day that he wants to become the world's strongest swordsman, and he just decided to carve out that destiny and make that an actuality, right? I like that story quite a bit. Then over time we learn that like he's actually basically born to be a swordsman because he's from the land of Wano, the land of swordsmen, and he's the descendant of the sword god Ryuma. It just makes it, to me, it doesn't do anything for the character. It neuters the character concept for me in a way. So it's complicated in the sense that like, look, Rocks being Blackbeard's father is interesting in the sense that you can delve into some thematic ideas of like this will being passed down, right? The will of Xebec not really dying, right? You can get into these parallels between like Blackbeard versus Ace and Rocks and Roger and stuff like that, right? Those ideas kind of gain greater weight, right? So there's things that there's some level of weight that's added to the events of the story, but at the same time, then I think if you look at the individual characters, each individual character that is then revealed to be a Nepo baby, it feels like something is lost a little bit for them in terms of it just being like them having really carved out their own fate and destiny versus them just being born to do so because they just have the good parent genes or whatever, right? I'm still holding out hope that Mihawk does not have any sort of special lineage. I think that would make, I mean, it's looking like fucking Kaido might be Harold's son at this point, right? So if that's the case, it's looking like we just got Mihawk and Big Mom. And Big Mom's a joke. So just Mihawk as the the only characters really beating the Nepo baby allegations. Yeah, I just don't. I think also when it just becomes like the entire roster of characters in the modern day, like if it's revealed that Buggy also is the son of Rocks, to me that's not cool either because like it's just like it might be cool if Blackbeard wasn't also the son of Rocks, but with Buggy also being the son of Rocks, then it's just like, okay, so Buggy, who was the poster child of characters that's like literally got no talent, no strength, nothing, like a fucking fodder type character, he has like figured out his way to somehow climb the ladder or whatever. If it's revealed that he's Rox's son, then suddenly like it just gains a different slant in that it's like, well, of course, one way or another, he'd be destined to do so. He's got that, like, he's got the Rocks genes in him, right? So things will just work out in a certain way for him, right? Even if it's not exactly strength, it's just, of course, it's fitting that Buggy made it to the top two. I don't know. I don't like it. I think it adds weight to individual storylines and situations, but when it just becomes the blanket rule that every character just has to be the son of some other character, that's not my thing. I don't like it when it becomes like, the universal rule for storytelling. It makes it feel less unique. Because you guys remember when it was revealed that Ace was Roger's son? That was a huge reveal, right? Like, that was a huge reveal, right? Now it's just like, Blackbeard is Xebec's son. It's kind of like, it's a cool reveal still, because it tells us more, like, it adds some weight to Blackbeard's story, but it's not a shocker, right? If anything, I think a lot of people already felt like Rocks being Blackbeard's son is just such a simple, obvious option that, like, people were looking for something more surprising in terms of who Rocks' kid might be. But at the end of the day, it was the straightforward option, which was Blackbeard. Noah Long, thanks for the 5. Do you think Rocks has 2 or more fruits since he has the same lineage as Blackbeard? Also, do you think Rocks was a king? I think Rocks was a king. The 2 or more fruits thing. So I'll say this right away. I think based on Rox's introduction, his personality is different than Blackbeard's. It's similar, but it's different. And his introduction right off the bat feels like a Conqueror's Hockey type introduction. It feels like a Conqueror's Hockey introduction. Um, uh, whoops. Hold on. As for the multiple fruits, I don't know if he has the multiple fruit. Maybe he'll have multiple fruits, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a Blackbeard specific thing. Oh. Hold on. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a Blackbeard specific thing, because Blackbeard supposedly has a special body that allows him to do it. So I wonder who Rox's wife is. Like, that's going to be interesting. We're going to maybe find out Rox's wife in the midst of all this. Yeah. The two colored hair might even hint at something like that, like Rox having two fruits or something. But I don't think. I feel like at this moment in time, maybe Rox doesn't have two fruits. Maybe it's too early in his journey. I don't know. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Behenor, I think that with Rox's fruits, I think I would especially dislike if Rox has like the same two fruits that Blackbeard does. I think what would be cool is if, like, to me, what would be really cool is if Rox has like the Nika fruit or something like that. If Rox has the Nika fruit, I think that would be really sick. Yeah, like a fruit that's very surprising to us. What if Rox had the Guru Guru no Mi, and then when he died, then Whitebeard got the Guru Guru no Mi? That'd be kind of interesting, too. Behenor, thanks a lot. If we're getting Rox's design reveal this flashback, I think we're also getting Imu's reveal. One was when Loki met Xebec, and I think Harold will directly meet Imu, and we'll see Imu's full look then. One was when Loki met... I think we're also getting the Imu reveal. One was when Loki... Ah, I see what you're seeing. Because Loki meeting Xebec gave us Rox's reveal, and then maybe Harold... Ooh, shit. So you think we're going to maybe get like a flashback to what Harold experienced at the Reverie? I think we should, right? I think we should. You know what's something very, very interesting? So shout out to Sunny Clip. So I just mentioned this in the chapter review, which will go out tomorrow, obviously. But shout out to Sunny Clip. So Sunny Clip is one of my top tier patrons, Pirate King level patron. If you haven't checked out the Pirate King podcast, it just dropped today, so go listen to that after this. Answered a shit ton of interesting questions there. But Sunny Clip, one of my Pirate King members, mentioned this, which is, what if... So Rox was at the Reverie, right? Meaning that Rox was likely a king to start with. Let's assume that. Rox was a king. What if... And this was 56 years ago. What if Brook was part of the military royal guard that was part of Rox's kingdom? What if that was the case? And then, because we know something happened at a Reverie or something like that, then, like, basically Brook stopped being a royal guard for that king and became a pirate himself, right? Rox switched from a king to a pirate at this Reverie. Maybe Brook was part of his royal guard. So shoutouts to Sunny Clip if you're in the chat. But that's a very, very interesting possibility, right? It would also potentially connect, like, the Gunko storyline. Like, there's something that happened that it seems like we're likely to find out about Brook's story, because that's being teased here. There's something that happened at the Reverie that Harold went to, right? And Rox did something there that swapped him from being a king to a pirate. I wonder if all of those things line up. Even timeline-wise, it might line up. So I think there's some very, very interesting possibilities right there. So shouts to Sunny Clip. Morio Anime, thanks for the 2. Elbaf clears Wano and Egghead, tied with Whole Cake Island. I would say, I think it's early. I think it's early days to say anything. I think with Egghead's a very hard arc for me to judge, because it was really an arc that was focused on side characters. Like, if you just track just the Straw Hat storyline in Egghead, it's ass. Like, it's basically nothing. Like, they're there, some shit starts happening at the island, and they have some skirmishes and skedaddle out of there. They don't even really save Vegapunk. They kind of do, but they don't. There's not that much of a story for like main through line for the characters. But what Egghead did was really open up the world of One Piece side characters. So obviously some of that took place at Egghead with Bonnie and Kuma arriving there and us getting their story. But then also everything that it did for Kobe and Garp and Aokiji and Blackbeard and everything. And then the Law, Kid, Shanks, those storylines happening in the background. Sabo and the Reverie and Cobra and all of that stuff. Like, Egghead was really... And then obviously the big announcements and reveals to the world. Egghead was really powerful if you looked at it as like a story arc that was more so about moving the world of One Piece forward than anything. So it's hard to compare to other story arcs. In terms of traditional One Piece story arcs, right? Traditional One Piece story arcs, I think that this one is on track for me right now, currently on track to be my favorite post-time skip, and like possibly one of my favorites ever, so we just gotta wait and see. Oh wait, I'm skipping ahead. Let me slow down a second here. Here, let's go. EOS Kid greater than Joy Boy. Maybe you want to change that name at some point. Thanks for the 2. Could Shiki be in Elbaf's heaven right now? Maybe. Like, the answer is yes, maybe. I just don't know how important Shiki is supposed to be as a character today, you know? I don't know how, like, Shiki was, like, I think Oda's using Shiki as, like, a prominent character from the previous age, but I don't think Shiki's supposed to be, like, a pivotal character in the narrative of One Piece in general. But I might be wrong. Elijah Petty, thanks for the 5. Does this chapter undermine Whitebeard's philosophy that children aren't their parents' sins? Maybe Akainu wasn't entirely wrong. What? Children aren't there? Are you saying because, like, Blackbeard turned out to be so bad and everything? You know, it's kind of... No, because, like, just because Blackbeard ended up following the path of Rocks, it's kind of like, first of all, Blackbeard was dealt a shit hand. It seems like based on Blackbeard's upbringing, he had a really, really fucking rough go at it, right? But like, we just got some glimpses of it. Now, that doesn't excuse everything, but, you know, just because Blackbeard turned out to be similar to Rocks, right? That doesn't mean everybody. Because at the same time, like, one thing that doesn't help is that, like, a big deal is about, like, children and, like, children should not be blamed for the sins of their father, but then, like, a lot of times the kids, like, the fathers in the first place were never bad people, right? Like, it's like, Luffy's evil because he's Dragon's son, but it's like, Dragon's also not like the world government calls Dragon evil, but Dragon's trying to free the world, right? Ace is evil because he's Roger's son. The world government calls Roger evil, but Roger was also trying to, at the end of his, like, he wasn't like an evil pirate the way that they painted him out to be and everything, right? But there are exceptions, right? I think in this vein, Yamato is low-key an important character because Kaido is genuinely like a shitty dude who destroyed a country, and Yamato actually grew up 100% under Kaido's influence, like locked up, chained up, Stockholm syndromed and everything like that, but she still grew up to be an independent thinker. No, not an independent thinker because she got all of her thoughts from a fucking diary, but she still grew up with a good heart at the end of the day, right? So I think Yamato breaks the mold there, breaks the trend. Katakuri is not like Big Mom. Katakuri does do, like, he stabbed the chefs and stuff, but Katakuri ultimately is like a kind, nurturing brother at the very least and is very honorable, whereas Big Mom is kind of a backstabbing type character. Like, there are characters that buck the trend, right? Shanks and the Figarlands, right? Shanks and the Celestial Dragons, you know? So Whitebeard's philosophy isn't like, it's not going to be right in every case. It's more so just, it's a case by case. But like, a child is just, they're independent of their parents' sins. Maybe the child turns out to be bad, but that's not because the parent was necessarily good or bad, right? Doflamingo turned out shitty as fuck, even though his father at least stopped being a celestial, like, his father was one of the best celestial dragons you could be, right? So the idea is that the child should be viewed as independent. I think that's still, like, just because Blackbeard happened to be bad doesn't mean that Whitebeard's wrong. Carnage, thanks for the 5. How would you rank these 4 characters based on what you think happens at God Valley? Roger, Garp, Whitebeard, and Rocks. I'm just gonna go ahead and rank what I think their strength was at God Valley. I personally think so. I think it's confirmed somewhere that Whitebeard wasn't at his prime in God Valley. So and Whitebeard reached his prime somewhat later. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Whitebeard as the last of that group. Not because I think Whitebeard is in his prime the last of that group, but because I think that's kind of partly the reason Whitebeard wasn't his own captain at that point. He kind of seemed to play the role of Rox's first mate in a sense, right? If the crew had a first mate. But I don't think, I think Whitebeard, let's just say, was last. I think Whitebeard is also the youngest of that group. Let's just say Whitebeard is last, okay? But not because I think Whitebeard in his prime is last out of that group. I'm just saying at God Valley, I wouldn't be surprised if Whitebeard is last. Also because I think that battle would not be winnable for the... Like, if Whitebeard was at his prime in God Valley, then I don't think they defeat the Rocks Pirates, you know? Like, because Whitebeard and Roger basically cancel out. Whitebeard and Garp basically cancel out, or maybe Whitebeard even wins, or you don't know. You know, like, so I'm going to go ahead and put Whitebeard last. I'm going to favor the side that won, just because we have so little information, right? So little information. So, like, don't get all worked up over this or whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and favor the side that won. So I'm going to go put Whitebeard last. I personally think that Roger would be number one of that group. I think Roger was weaker than Rocks prior to God Valley, but I personally think that what we will see at God Valley once we get to that flashback, I think God Valley will be the changing of the guard. I think that will be when Roger has whatever... like his most important moment is supposed to be, like his final hockey bloom, right? Because Roger had to have reached his peak at some point, right? I think it would have been at God Valley. I think there's a lot of symbolism associated with God Valley in terms of like the end of Rox's reign, and then that was like the big legendary battle for Roger, where he kind of like, obviously it was a team effort, right? Because no one could take down the Rocks Pirates by themselves, but that is Roger's most legendary battle, right? So, like, I think that's his, that whenever Roger reached his peak, it would probably have been at God Valley. So I think in God Valley, we may see Roger have whatever final hockey bloom he's supposed to have or something like that, and maybe eke past Rocks or something. Or maybe it was a team effort. Maybe it took Roger and Garps together to take down Rocks. I don't know. That's also possible, too. But I do think that God Valley is being built up a little bit more as like the story of the Roger Pirates. So yeah, I just lean a little bit right now towards Roger surpassing Rocks there. So let's say I've got Roger number 1, Rocks 2. Maybe Garp 3. It feels disrespectful to say Garp is just like, because Garp, you could argue, is like, should still be equal to Roger or something like that, or equal to Rocks. I don't know. I'll put Garp 3 and Whitebeard 4. I might be being disrespectful to Garp. I think that's entirely possible. I think it's just the way that Oda's hyped. It's a problem because, like, the way Oda's hyped so many of these legends, it is genuinely difficult to make a conclusive sort of statement like, this character definitely above this character, right? Because, like, we know so many things. We know, like, Whitebeard had the title of the strongest man. Whitebeard was equal to Roger in his prime. Whitebeard and Roger, like, in their primes were basically like a tie, right? But at the same time, we know Whitebeard, okay, he didn't reach his prime for a bit. But then we also know that Garp, he also ran Roger really close. Like, he nearly killed Roger on multiple occasions. What does that mean? Does that mean that he was, like, equal to Roger? Does that mean that he was, like, almost strong enough to beat Roger, but not quite? Like, are we supposed to view Roger, Garp, and Whitebeard as all equals or what? And then, like, you hear about Rocks, and Rocks is apparently Roger's greatest foe, right? And it took this big team effort to take down him and his crew. And most of Rox's accomplishments and his legacy was erased. So that's why you never even hear about Rocks when other characters like Roger, Garp, and Whitebeard are being hyped up, right? So there's, like, arguments across the board for how we're supposed to view all these characters. I don't think we're going to be able to get it right till we get God Valley. That's just me shooting my off the top of my head guess. The one thing I would say I'm kind of confident on is that Whitebeard wouldn't be number 1 or number 2 among those 4 at God Valley, just because I think Whitebeard is established to reach his prime later. All right. Continuing on. Eric J.O. on the topic of Whitebeard. Thanks for being a Yonko chairman for 21 months, man. Love seeing Whitebeard in backstories. It's like seeing dad lore play out. Imagine hearing your dad used to run with the baddest dude around. Yeah. It's just like, Whitebeard, what are you doing with these guys? Like, these are some bad eggs, but he's just there. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 150 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 150. Tio Treviso says you could say equal to Roger for like 4 other characters. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, it says something that Roger is generally used, like, by other One Piece characters, Roger is kind of used as the bar. So it's like, when characters want to hype up how strong a character is, they're like Buggy's like, Whitebeard, he's so legendary because he's the only guy that even ever managed to tie with Gold Roger, right? So it's kind of like Roger's obviously the bar that everyone knows of, and then it's like, well, how did you stack up to Roger, right? It's kind of like, you know, like it's like Muhammad Ali or something like that, right? Same with Garp. It's like, why is Garp so legendary? Because Garp was the only Marine that actually managed to be a threat to, like, a significant threat to Roger, you know? The Final Storm, thanks for the 5. Someone said, if Rocks killed an admiral, that must mean Mihawk can kill 4 admirals. The whole Mihawk thing is so ridiculously toxic but hilarious. What? Why does it mean Mihawk can kill 4 admirals? There aren't even 4 admirals. That means that, like, they think that if you lined up Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru, Mihawk would be like, no. This is not enough. Get fucking Fujitora in here or some shit. Alright, now this is a good spread, but I can still beat all 4 of them. So Mihawk takes 5 admirals to beat. God damn, how strong do they think Vista is then? The Water God, thanks for the 5. Since Emu can inhabit bodies, could the silhouette we see actually be another body that he's using? Maybe. Yeah, that's entirely possible, and then we don't see Emu's actual body for some time. That would be pretty crazy. I don't... People are saying that anything that happens with any character with a sword is Mihawk upscale. Mihawk's not even alive at this... He doesn't even have the title of World's Strongest Swordsman. Grizzly Adams, thanks for the 5. I hope the woobification of Loki doesn't fully distract people from the genuinely interesting and more grounded story we're also getting for Hadruden. Yeah, I think Oda's doing good stuff for both Loki and Hadruden here. Really good stuff. I like the idea that both brothers have what the other brother covets. It's definitely making it a very interesting dynamic, and I'm looking forward to seeing how these two brothers' stories, like, reconcile and reunite at the end of this storyline. Yeah, I'm still just not going to care about Hadruden for... I'll probably care once we cut back to the modern-day story about Hadruden. Let's get the streamlights up to 150 real quick. Justin Simon, thanks for the 5. Anyone know where I can get that shirt? Great question, Justin. It will be available soon. It will be available soon. You guys like? Yeah? This is... you can't get this. You can't... This is not on a market just yet. It's not on a market. Don't worry about how I got it. But it will be made available for you guys soon. It's not on a market just yet. Glad you like the shirt. D. Robin, thanks for the 5. Buggy plus Blackbeard equals parallel to Hadruden plus Loki. With Buggy... Oh, that's a great point. Buggy being the Hadruden in terms of, like, he's weak, and Blackbeard's the strong one, and Shanks plus Shamrock, Brotherhood, Blood versus Found Family. I could see that stuff. I could see that. Yeah, a lot of Brotherhood shit. Is this arc gonna be? Because I felt like this arc would emphasize the theme of fatherhood quite a bit, because that seemed like it was set to be very important. But also Brotherhood seems like it's becoming very, very important here as well. Interesting. Buggy, Blackbeard, Rocks, Hadruden, Loki, Harold, Shanks, Shamrock, Garling. Maybe those are all things that could be explored here. Meek, thanks for the 5. What are your thoughts on the giant Galila / Galera company? How does this affect the future of the story? So I really wanted to write this Tuesday's video about that because I have a shit ton to say about that. It has been put on hold because the Rocks thing is... Like, sometimes there's a video that I want to talk about more, but you also know what viewers want to hear about more, which is, like, the Rocks stuff at the end of the day. So I have a good video coming out on rocks. So that's still a strong topic that I really was enjoying breaking down. And even like doing the video helped me actually change my own perspective on rocks and like the potential of him in the story in general. But my immediate thing that I wanted to write about was the Galila Company shit. This arc is all I can say, me, because I'm going to put out that video at some point, I promise. All I can say is that this arc is going to be so fucking important for Frankie. And the blueprints that Frankie has, that he got handed down, it's from that fucking group of ancient giants. That's what I'll say for now. All right? He has their blueprints. He's carrying their legacy. That's why he's at the fucking Atom Tree right now. Oda's a fucking madman, crazy genius. EOS Kid, and there's other things. People are missing out. There's other things that are tied to those ancient giants that we've already been told about in the story, that I'm just gonna leave for the moment. EOS Kid, greater than Joyboy, thanks for the 2. Kid is different, not a Nepo baby, no D, just him. But we kind of saw what happens if you don't got those Nepo genes, which is you just die. I hope that Kid is something special, without being a Nepo baby, but at this point, we just have to hope that Kid makes a reappearance in the story, period, you know? Let's get the stream lights up to 200 real quick. JP, thanks for the 20, man. I do think it's more than father-son, that maybe Rocks could be one of Blackbeard's theorized alternate personas. What if he had Law's Fruit? That's how he cut the mountain and vanished at Reverie, and can do some body shenanigans. So JP, I saw something going around on Twitter, like a little short video. Let me share it with you guys. I don't know who this is not, all I can say is it's not my idea. It's just something I saw on Twitter. Something about how the immortality surgery, maybe the way that it actually works is that it lets you transplant your body into different vessels. So somebody was theorizing that maybe, Blackbeard himself is actually Rocks. Like maybe Blackbeard is Rocks, and Rocks actually, once he went down, he transplanted his soul into his son or something, and that's how he's able to use two fruits, all of that stuff. It's an interesting possibility. Behenort, thanks a lot. Also, Harold really had big-time connections to both Blackbeard and Emu. Harold really had big-time connections to both Blackbeard and Emu. Big-time connections. It's a really interesting theory. I like that theory. It would also explain something about like maybe Emu's body hopping as well, because maybe Emu had that immortality surgery done. Yeah, it's a very interesting theory. Harold really had big-time connections to both Blackbeard and Emu. Blackbeard via his dad, but still. So this is another arc like Egghead that showcases both big bads early on into the final saga. Yeah. It's... Oda's really playing with a lot with the Emu and Blackbeard, like, juggling both of them, you know? He's really playing with a lot there. It's the final villain of the story could go either way. Like, 1 second you're so certain that it's Emu, and then it just swings back, like, with this whole rock stuff and just re-emphasizing the importance of Blackbeard in the story. It's just like, fuck, maybe... Like, Blackbeard's so much more of an interesting character, but Emu is the traditional final big bad. It could go either way. It's really interesting. Starbright, thanks for the 5. Rocks having a crew of all fruit users versus Roger's crew who use nothing but hockey is a dope contrast. Yeah, they are all fruit users, aren't they? Kaido wasn't a fruit user at the time, so maybe that's the exception. And it's possible Whitebeard didn't have the Goro no Mi at the time. We don't know when he picked it up. The Final Storm, thanks for the 5. Oda just dropped one of the most hypest chapters of all time. Multiple times this arc, to be honest, and he's still saving Dragon. Dragon may be peak hype by end of story. Yeah, I do feel like with this chapter, the dragon is secretly Rocks' son. That theory probably died. I mean, it didn't die, but it's just, there's just nothing to base it off of anymore. The design similarities are not even there anymore. But it still establishes that, like at this point, we're seeing Rocks fight, in a sense. Not fight, but we're getting Rocks storytelling before Dragon. Dragon really is the character that Oda is saving more than any other character in the story, which is just very interesting. Like, we've seen Emu take action in some ways at this point. Jaren's Rambo, thanks for the 2. Why do you think Oda brings Croc back into the story? Why do I think Oda brings Croc back into the story? Okay, so I think that there's certain things that are, I think it's a little complicated. So I think that on the one hand, I don't know if it was always Oda's plan to bring Crocodile back in the story. So, for example, Oda's talked about how, the Shichibukai in general, they weren't necessarily planned, right? They were things that he planted. However, I do believe that there's a lot of characters that he planned from the beginning that were always supposed to be important. Like, Mihawk was always going to be a character, right? Like, Mihawk's a fucking character in the fucking one-shot with Ryuma, like monsters, like a version of Mihawk is there. Like, there was always going to be somebody that Zoro had to fight and defeat to become the world's strongest swordsman. But I think the Shichibukai basically became a hub group for Oda to place all of his, like, miscellaneous pieces in the One Piece world that he didn't know exactly where to place beforehand. So it's like, okay, well, Oda never planned for Mihawk to be like an emperor necessarily, but he was like, okay, if I'm making this other group, the Shichibukai, I can slot Mihawk in here. And like maybe Kuma was always planned or something. So he's like, maybe, okay, you know what, I can tell the story of Kuma by putting him in the Shichibukai. So maybe Jinbei, a fisherman pirate for Luffy, was always planned. So Oda might have been like, okay, I'll make this a pirate as part of the Shichibukai, right? So I feel like Oda had a lot of planned pieces, and then he when he came up with the planned floating pieces, and then the Shichibukai became a hub for him to place a lot of them. But I don't believe that Crocodile, for example, was always going to be like an endgame character for Oda. I think what is more likely, and this is just guessing, right? But I think what's more likely is that Oda had a lot of like the big things in mind, big things in place in terms of what he wanted to do, end a story in the various factions and things. And then as the story progresses, he recognizes how he can utilize past characters, find ways for them to grow, and also fit into the plot that he also already created to make those plot points work, right? So maybe Oda always planned on this concept of like cross guild with like Buggy turning into an emperor and like bringing in some former, like bringing in, like basically creating a motley crew of some significant characters like Mihawk and stuff. And maybe Crocodile wasn't always planned to return, but maybe Oda realized that, like, this cross-guild thing, like, it wouldn't really make sense for Buggy to be the mastermind behind it, but, like, if I actually need a mechanism to make this whole guild come together, Crocodile is the planner. He's the one who would do that. He created Baroque Works. That's what this guy does. He creates these organizations. So Oda basically realized that Crocodile was the perfect mechanism to make the Buggy storyline work, if that makes sense. So that's my guess. So maybe Oda doesn't have like a super important endgame plan for Crocodile. Or maybe he's come up with some important contribution, but he's found a way to weave the characters that he views as fitting into his previous plans into the story seamlessly. And give them roles and ways of moving the plot forward. Zolden, thanks for the 10. Blackbeard being Rocks' son is simple, but I feel like it could be symbolic that Blackbeard is trying to take on his biological father's will rather than allow himself to find a new family like so many others. Yeah, it's true. Like, Blackbeard could have just embraced the love that Whitebeard showed him and everything like that, but he did not waver from the path that his father essentially left behind for him. Like, he chose the path that his biological father would have wanted for him rather than what his adopted father wants. It's so crazy that like seeing Rocks and Whitebeard side by side, and it's like your son is going to be adopted by him and then kill him to follow in your footsteps. It's kind of crazy. It's insane to think about that. Like, these two characters, like the future, where their story heads. Whitebeard doesn't know. Whitebeard doesn't even know. It's tragic. Catch P, thanks for the... Caleb P, thanks for the 5. Pasty Cash, thanks for the 2. Do you think Whitebeard knew Blackbeard is Rocks' son? I think it's possible, but I don't think Whitebeard would have cared that much. I don't think Whitebeard would have cared. There's some things, like, I kind of want to go back to the conversation with Whitebeard telling Ace not to go after Blackbeard. So Whitebeard tells Ace, don't go after Blackbeard. Keep in mind, though, when Whitebeard told Ace that I don't care that you're Roger's son, that was a lie. Whitebeard did very, very much care that Ace was Roger's son. He would have embraced Ace regardless, but it is made very, very clear in the story that Whitebeard, like, listened to Roger, knew the significance of Roger's will, and understood the significance of Ace being the perfect person to become the next Pirate King. Like, that's established very clearly in the story. Like, it's spelled out. It's like, dude, Whitebeard was never interested in becoming Pirate King. He wanted you to become Pirate King. That was the whole point. That's why Whitebeard took Ace under his umbrella. So it's not actually like it doesn't diminish the quote of like Whitebeard telling Ace like we're all children of the sea, like it doesn't really matter or whatever. But it was a lie when Whitebeard's saying that like you're Roger's son. I never cared about that. It's like Whitebeard fucking knew that this is supposed to be the guy who's supposed to be the next Pirate King. That's kind of important. Let's see. Yeah, Whitebeard says, Ace, that's enough of this. Just this once, I have a very bad feeling about this. So he's telling Ace not to go after Blackbeard. I don't think it ultimately matters whether or not Whitebeard knew or not. I just don't think it ultimately matters. I really don't think it matters. I mean, like, at the end of the day, Whitebeard fucking worked with Rocks for the longest time. You know? Like, he worked, like, why would he reject his former captain's son in the first place? If Whitebeard, like, truly had a deep-seated vendetta against Rocks or something like that, then why did he work with him all the way up till God Valley? Like, he only stopped working with him when Rocks fucking died. So, if anything, like, Whitebeard and Roger, they actually butted heads on the opposite side of the battlefield multiple times, right? Both at God Valley and then obviously at the battle during Odin's flashback, right? Whitebeard and Rocks, like, they seem to get on each other's nerves or whatever, but Whitebeard was cool going along with the Rocks for the longest time. So, like, there's no sort of, I don't think, like, it wouldn't even matter. It's not like Whitebeard's taking in the son of it, like, his sworn enemy or something. Just because we view Rocks as, like, a bad dude, Whitebeard, that was his captain, so it's just like, what difference does it make, you know? Anyway, continuing on. Snap, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 33 months. OMG, long time and life is going good, but this chapter was so good. We know for sure Rocks is Blackbeard's dad now. So amazing. Yeah. Again, I'll always say it's like, this was the most straightforward Lineage reveal in One Piece. Just the most straightforward one imaginable. But sometimes straightforward and like the simple is what's best for the story and carries the most meaning for the story. And yeah, this chapter was just phenomenal. The backstory is just so fucking exciting. Like, what we've got ahead of us. I feel like Oda's gonna still blue ball us with God Valley. I don't think we're getting God Valley out of this, but I think we're gonna get a lot more. Do we think that? Hold on. Let me run a couple polls. Okay, so first I'm gonna ask about Buggy, and then I'm gonna ask about Kaido. Is Buggy also Rox's son? Yes. No. Kid Smitty 94, thanks for the 5. It just occurred to me this chapter that Roger and Whitebeard and Whiteboarded were originally enemies. I wonder if that changes at God Valley or after it. Yeah, it's tricky because, like, at God Valley, they would have been on opposite sides of the battlefield, but then there's a long stretch of time, like, roughly like some 20 years after God Valley, right? And the sea is only so big, right? So they would have run into each other on occasions. I think it's been, I don't know if this is retcon or not, but I feel like it's been implied or stated that the crews actually ran into each other multiple times. So they may have just developed a friendly rivalry, realizing that they're cut from the same cloth, I guess, in terms of personality and strength and everything like that after a few times. Yeah. Okay, so people are leaning towards Buggy is not the son of Rocks. But then I want to ask about Harold. And Kaido. I don't know how much, like, the thing about Roger and Rocks Roger and Whitebeard at God Valley, I think at God Valley there's so many points of interest. Like, the primary dynamic is going to be Roger and Rocks, right? And then there's other things like, okay, well, what led to Garp siding with Roger against Rocks and to defend Celestial Dragons? What led to that? What was the role of Garling and everything in this that led to Shanks being left behind? There's so many other factors that I don't know. Unless Oda gives us like a fucking 10-chapter, 5-chapter long flashback of God Valley, I don't know if there's going to be time to focus on any sort of like Roger and Whitebeard making a connection particularly. So I feel like I'm not confident about that part. Is Harold Kaido's father? Yes, no. Harold was getting around if he was Kaido's father. I mean, actually, that's not fair to say because he's alive for like centuries. I think being fathering like 3 kids across like 3 centuries is not the craziest thing. Virgil Hawkins, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 33 months. The Pirate King podcast just came out, man, so check that out. Obviously, you got your questions, and I just answered your questions and everything yesterday. Always good to see you, man, and thank you for the long time support. So go check out the Pirate King podcast after this if you haven't already. Catching up on stream now, but I feel like saying that Harold is excused because he's Elbaf's father is like saying Hiruzen is excused for letting Naruto be ostracized. Also, read Witch Hat Atelier. Okay, so oh yeah, you keep telling me about that. I think I have that in my to read list. I'll pull it up one more time. Okay, so the Hiruzen situation is a little bit different because how do I say this? The Hiruzen situation is kind of I feel like the Hiruzen situation is like, so for those of you who don't know, the third Hokage basically treated Naruto like absolute shit. Didn't tell him who his father was, gave him like basically no money or housing or lodging, and basically let everyone in the village hate him. I think that was borderline like just neglect. I mean, I guess I'm not trying to excuse Harold. But Harold did have to deal with like an entire nation that really fucking needed him. Like the nation was fucking falling apart. And it was a crucial time in Elbaf's journey. So at the end of the day, it's not an excuse, but it's just like he had to carry a lot on his shoulders. He could have found a better person to take care of Loki. He could have definitely done that. But with the third Hokage, he didn't find anyone at all to take care of Naruto. I think that's kind of the crazy. Like, he literally treated Naruto like this poor, random outcast kid rather than like fucking royalty. Like, Loki was still raised as the king's son and given all the benefits and everything. It's just the people hated him because of the curse that Estrid and people like claimed was tied to Loki. Harold should have done more to clear that up and try to enforce that it's not Loki's fault. Like, you all are hating on Loki for no reason. But the third Hokage fucking like, he not only let the entire village hate on Naruto, it was very easily cleared up. Like, I think it's harder to disprove people's superstition. So if people believe that Loki is cursed, it is hard to disprove to people that Loki is cursed. But with Naruto, he could have literally just, like, it wasn't about curses or anything like that. The people of the village generally viewed Naruto as, like, a monster that, like, was the reason for the nine-tailed fox, and all he had to do was explain that, no, this is the son of the fourth Hokage, and the fourth Hokage went out sealing the fox inside Naruto. Naruto is essentially the savior of the village. Like, that's more just, like, logistical true facts that the third Hokage was for some reason hiding from the village to make Naruto's life miserable. Like, Naruto could be viewed as basically like Jesus practically, like the chosen child or some shit. But instead or like fucking Harry Potter, you know, like Harry Potter from birth basically saved everybody. But instead, like, the third Hokage let everyone just believe a bunch of shit about Naruto, and then also let him live on like garbage allowance and like a fucking orphan or something like that. So I think it's a little bit different personally. And the last thing I'll say is that the third Hokage didn't do jack shit as a Hokage as far as I was watching in Naruto. Like, the village seemed fine. Harold was actually trying to like revamp all of Elbaf and was having to deal with like a very tumultuous time in the world. I think the responsibilities that we were shown Harold dealing with were significantly greater than what the third Hokage's bum ass had to deal with. The final storm, thanks for the 5. The other 2 admirals showed up and Rock said, let us postpone this match. And the other 2 admirals said, that would seem advantageous to both of us. I don't want to get into all of this. I know where this is trying to lead down, but we're going to leave this for the moment. Brook is the GOAT. Thanks a lot. Hot take. Mihawk is only Admiral level and not Yonko. He dueled a Shanks that wasn't his prime 12 years ago when he reached Yonko 6 years ago. I don't like that take. So interestingly, because I've been in the community, the Mihawk stuff is always going to be interesting to me because like I've been on the other side of this. Because if you go back, like if you just rewind, like a decade or so, okay, more than a decade, okay, post Marineford, Mihawk was not argued to be, like it was like, because post Marineford we'd had like all the admirals show out, Whitebeard show out, Shanks show up, stop the war and everything like that, and Mihawk was busy dueling with Vista, and like Crocodile was talking shit to him, and Mihawk was used as like a way to hype up Jozu. Like there was not a single moment in the war that was actually like the iceberg was the one thing that people had to go off of, but it didn't. How do you scale? Like you want to see characters actually fight, right? So Mihawk's stocks were at an all-time low. So I remember during that period of time, Mihawk versus Admirals was like a debate in general. And it was kind of like, is Mihawk above Aokiji? Is Mihawk above... Like, that was a general thing. There were some people who believed that Mihawk wasn't like that much further above first mates, like Marco. We didn't know all the first mates at the time, but that was a thing. So I remember way back when Mihawk had to be defended relentlessly, because that was a period of time that the only thing that we had going for Mihawk was basically like world's strongest swordsman statement, and what do you call the statement or the title world's strongest swordsman, and the fact that he had duels with Shanks. But at that point we knew so little about the One Piece power scaling that like there were so many questions in terms of like it wasn't confirmed at that point that like how much is Haki part of swordsmanship. Right now we know Haki's a huge part of, like, Haki is swordsmanship, right? Those two things are, you're using Haki when you're fighting with your sword, right? But at that point in time, there were so many questions. It was like, we didn't know, is Shanks like a hybrid fighter? So some people still believe that Shanks might have eaten a devil fruit or something. Does Shanks fight with punches and kicks? That was another part of the conversation. Shanks is Haki that's stronger than Mihawk, so we didn't really know how like Haki versus stronger swordsman. So there was a point in the story that it was genuinely very, very hard to argue Mihawk as being at that level. Now things have shifted because several things have changed in that we learned about we've learned over time that like when you're fighting with Haki with swordsmanship, it's the same, like it's one and the same, right? Like it's not like Haki's a totally separate whatever. Like you're using Haki on your sword, right? That's what it is, right? So like in their duels, Shanks and Mihawk were both using Haki on their swords, obviously, right? Zoro, Haki's a big part of his growth and development, right? So that's been confirmed over time. Oda doubled down by establishing Mihawk's sword skills are above Shanks's. Like that was established with Mihawk's bounty poster thing. And then the biggest thing that people are really like, where I think they go too far, is with the Black Blades thing, because we learned that Mihawk's the only person besides Ryuma to have created a Black Blade. And then that just turned into a whole shit show, because now it's like people are jumping to assume that if he had a Black Blade, whereas other characters don't, that inherently means he's stronger than those other characters, when we have no idea what the fuck having a Black Blade means at this moment in time. But Mihawk fans have basically taken that and ran with it. So at this point, things have gone full, like, I've seen it go from, like, genuinely having to argue, like, Mihawk he's not, like, just first mate level, he's stronger than first mates, he's at least, like, he's comparable to the admirals. Like, there was a period of time where saying Mihawk was a Yonko level was, like, a huge stretch. Admirals versus who's, like, Mihawk is being, like, can he beat Kizaru, can he beat Aokiji? This is all, I promise you, this is what community discussion was like in the wake of Marineford. So I've seen things go from there all the way to today, where it's like Mihawk versus Roger, Mihawk. Mihawk versus Rocks, Mihawk. Mihawk versus fucking anybody in the verse except for Joy Boy, Imu, and Ryuma, it's Mihawk. So, like, I've seen him cross the spectrum in a way that I've never seen power scaling swing in all of One Piece. You know, like, it's kind of insane. So now I feel like it's almost crazy to me, like, remembering what it used to be like back when, like, Mihawk was fighting Vista and getting stopped by Jozu and shit like that. And people had to, like, come in to defend, like, no, Mihawk definitely could have cut Jozu. If they, like, those are all points of debate and discussion and everything like that way back. And, like, you can find old polls that would tell you that Mihawk loses to Kizaru, Mihawk loses to Aokiji and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's like, Mihawk beats Roger, Mihawk beats Rocks, Mihawk beats Whitebeard. It's like, holy shit, we've come a long way. So So now I feel insane because now I'm on the other. Like, I used to be somebody who was just like having to defend Mihawk a lot and be like arguing so much in his favor and why this doesn't represent him. And now I feel like I'm crazy because I'm on the other end. I'm like, just because Rocks has a sword doesn't mean Mihawk is stronger than Rocks. Like, that it just feels insane how far the pendulum has swung. Cup, thanks for the 2. Maybe Rocks does have Law's Devil Fruit and cut out his heart. Yeah, I saw that shit going around on Twitter. It's some other, I think it's like a TikTok person who came up with this theory, and it's a very interesting theory. That like a very interesting theory that like maybe Rocks is body hopping and his body hopped over to Blackbeard's body or something like that, Carnage, thanks for the 2. Do you think Loki would join Blackbeard if he asked? No, because I think, I would have said no for Aokiji too, but I think that Loki is not the type to be a subordinate to anybody else. That's the simple truth of it, unless that character like really, really like maybe if Luffy really moves him and moves Loki's heart in some way. It's the same way that Zoro is not the type to be a subordinate to anybody else. Like, that's established multiple times about his character. Zoro refused to join Baroque Works unless they made him the boss. Like, Yuru just talking about how Zoro doesn't look like someone who follows orders. But at the end of the day, like, if you find the right person with the right heart, right? Like, Zoro is willing to budge and join Luffy. Loki, I don't think, would view Blackbeard as... I don't know if Loki would join Blackbeard unless Blackbeard really manipulates him or gives him the wrong impression or something like that. Whereas I can see Luffy eventually moving Loki's heart, because what Loki essentially needs is like acceptance, right? So I personally will always believe that Loki's, not always, but I still believe that Loki's storyline ends in death. He's too strong to join the Straw Hats, too strong to be like a loose cannon in the One Piece world. I think his storyline leads towards death. Personally, I think he's carved out to be a tragic figure in many ways. I don't know. I don't think he would join Blackbeard. I just think in general he seems like he doesn't want to join anybody. And then Blackbeard, of all people, I don't know, because Loki also values like honorable warriors and stuff like that, right? Like, he talks about that sort of thing. I don't know if he would view Blackbeard like that. Let's get the stream likes up to 250 real quick. Echo Falls, thanks for the 5. Garp will be the vehicle for the God Value flashback, in my opinion. Blackbeard clearly inspired by his dad and will want to know how he died, maybe extracting Garp's God Value memories. Yes, I'm of that mentality. I do think that is how things will play out. I think we're going to have to wait for Garp for the God Value flashback, but I think that we're going to get the tease here. Kind of like we got... Oh my god. We got teased for the God Value flashback a little bit with Kuma. I think we're going to get more context on Rox's end of things from here through Loki stuff. And I think the full picture will come through once we get Garp's end of things. Kajwalti, thanks for the 5. How long is Elbaf going to be now? And how many arcs are we to go? We still have so much to learn and cover. I still believe that Elbaf, my personal belief is that I think Elbaf is going to end around chapter 1200. I'm still leaning towards that. And then after that, I think that we have one maybe massive final war arc after this. I used to think that Laugh-Tale and Marijois are going to be Laugh-Tale and the Final War are going to be two separate storylines. So I would kind of like give my estimates on when One Piece will end based on the notion that it's going to be two separate events. But now I lean more towards it's all going to come together at once. And so I feel like if Elbaf ends around 1200, then maybe we got like, I think after that we have somewhere between 100 to 200 chapters left after Elbaf. One final big saga. Somewhere between 100 and 200 chapters after Elbaf. 100 is obviously on the extreme low end, but 200 also feels on the high end, so I don't know. Dominus, thanks for the 5. That Rocks theory doesn't work. When Blackbeard had Law beat, he questioned if he should become immortal. That's true. It doesn't quite work, does it? Yeah, it was an exciting idea, but shit, that's a good point. It kind of shot an arrow through that. Okay, people also lean towards Harold not being Kaido's father. Yeah. Okay, so people are still basically saying the Buggy Rocks lineage, they lean no. The Kaido Harold lineage, they lean no. Dev, thanks for the 2. Think Shiki's a Kurozumi? Looks like young Kanjuro. You know, the fucked up part is that we literally saw Shiki's face in those, in the roulette of faces that the random old hag and that dude could transform into. That the old hag could transform into and shit. Gobbledees Nuts. So you might be onto something there. Gobbledees Nuts, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 9 months. I hope you just checked out the Pirate King podcast that dropped today. Can't believe you let Law decapitate Chopper. Yeah, it must have been Law because otherwise there'd be a lot more gore, right? Law does very seamless cuts, like a surgeon, huh? Glad you guys like the shirt. It's an exclusive at the moment, but if you guys are interested, we can see. Caleb P, thanks for the 5. This is the best arc of One Piece since post-time skip began. I've loved every single Elbaf chapter, and the final saga is shaping up to be incredible. Yeah, I think so far Elbaf is this deep into the arc. It's my favorite arc of any One Piece arc. It's just giving me everything that I would want. It feels very much like an OG One Piece arc. Yeah, I think the only other arc in post-time skip that has felt like an OG One Piece arc was Whole Cake Island. But Whole Cake also had some other things, like only half the crew was there. And then I think Whole Cake's finale is messy with some strong highs and lows. The Final Storm, thanks for the 2. Gadela made the Noah, Neptunians are waiting them. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that here. I've got a video coming on that. I think a shit ton of stuff just came together here. That's all I got to say. Pasty Cash, thanks for the 5. Mihawk fans finna cry when he's when it's shown he's not even close to Shanks. I don't even want to get into this here. I don't want to get in. I don't think there's any world where Mihawk is not close to Shanks, regardless of who you think is stronger. I think they're always been portrayed as like relative to one another. You know. Paul, thanks for the 5. Yuval Harari said, "If both sides seek absolute justice and Israel peace is impossible." Reminds me of Akainu. Justice without compromise breeds war. Did Akainu say justice without compromise breeds war? Oh, no, you just... Sorry, no, of course you wouldn't say that. It's the other way around. But yeah, that is what Akainu represents. Count Dogula, thanks for the 5. You think Blackbeard likes Rocks? Is he trying to finish his dad's mission or prove he's better than him? Seemed like a lonely kid in that drawing. Does Blackbeard like Rocks? He's trying to finish his dad's mission or prove he's better than him? I think Blackbeard is truly inspired by Rocks. I think that is a thing. I do think Blackbeard is trying to follow in his father's footsteps more than like Roger or something like that. I don't know about prove he's better than him. I think he is trying to genuinely pick up his father's legacy. That's my take at the moment. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 250 real quick. And he seemed like a lonely kid in that drawing because he'd lost his father, you know? Elijah Petty, thanks for the 2. If everyone read One Piece, there would be world peace. I don't think so. There are plenty of people who read One Piece who are still shitty people. I honestly, this is a sad thing to say, but I think that like people can read lots of stories and like take away lots of good messaging and everything from those stories. But I think that there's always going to be a huge disconnect between how people apply that to real life. I think that there just is. Like, stories can have really strong messaging and everything, and then the way humans actually act in real life, they don't have the, like, put it this way, like, generally speaking, there are a lot of universal morals that people are aware of, right? Like, we've taught them in a million different ways. Like, stories are one way, but, like, you know, most people are taught a similar set of morals growing up, right? There's variations depending on culture and like, you know, your family or whatever, but like we all have a similar basic moral framework and shit growing up, right? At the end of the day, those things don't actually, just because people know about them doesn't mean that they're actually applied. Like, once people are put in situations where emotions become a thing, where you're actually in the situation, where you have your own biases or selfish desires or like preconceptions, like how people act in real life or the views that they espouse in real life or the groups that they back and things like that, a lot of the moral teachings just go out the window. Or there's a lack, like there's cognitive dissonance where they're not able to recognize or have the self-awareness or reflection to realize like where their views and actions in real life are incongruent with what they know is technically morally right? I genuinely don't think that, like, this might be very blunt, but I don't think One Piece inspired, like, I seriously don't feel like stories actually have the power that people believe they do to change behavior. I don't think that's the case. I think it applies to some people, but I don't think that that's the case. Because like, it's One Piece isn't the only story in the world that teaches good morals. Most fucking stories that people read growing up teach good morals, and yet the world is obviously the way that it is, right? So, I just think that there's a disconnect. All right, continuing on. Continuing on. Let's get Streamlabs up to 250 real quick. Snap says, is that Shiki with sword, kimono? Is he from Wano? I mean, like, his face was shown in the options of transformations of that old hag in Wano, right? His face was shown. So it's very, very possible. I think it's very, very possible. Like, I wonder if Shiki's like a famous character from a famous clan or some shit from Wano. That'd be interesting. Molly, thanks for the 5. Elbaf is such a content-rich arc. Definitely one of Oda's best works, especially coming from Egghead. It's only going to get crazier from here. Yeah, the storyline of Elbaf has just been phenomenal on all fronts. What it's doing for the main characters, what it's doing for the side characters, what it's doing for the lore of the world, what it's doing in terms of sense of stakes and threat, how it's bringing so many story threads together. Elbaf has not missed so far, except for one chapter. Julian Reed, thanks for the 5. If Rocks was a king, it would make sense why Blackbeard also wants to become recognized as king of Beehive Island, restoring his family's royalty. Restoring his family's royalty. I missed that part. Because Blackbeard does come up from a line of kings, if assuming Rocks was a king. That is actually a phenomenal point. I didn't, because I always assumed that it was just because he wanted to get into Marijua, like be invited officially as a king. But Blackbeard is a king by birthright. That's interesting. That's a great point. Random guy 123, thanks for the 5. As the inheritor of Rocks' will, I think Blackbeard is meant to succeed where his father failed. Emu is just a stepping stone to the true final villain. It would be really, really fucking sick if Blackbeard is the one to take out Emu and Blackbeard becomes the final villain. It would be really sick. I still feel like the story comes down to Luffy defeating Emu and Blackbeard, but it oscillates so much, right? Like, if you ask One Piece fans every 3 months, the answer will be different depending on what the recent events of the story. Because I think prior to Elbaf, a lot of people had begun to lean towards Blackbeard potentially being the final villain. And then as we progressed through Elbaf, like, after Emu possessed Gunko and started doing all that crazy shit, I remember tuning into stream and, like, talking to people in stream and even running polls, and, like, the overwhelming consensus was like, no, Emu's the fucking final villain. Like, Emu's the final villain. Like, there's no way it's anybody else. It's got to be him. And now, what do you know? Like, 5-6 chapters later, and it's just like, shit, Blackbeard's really fucking important too. Like, it's gonna vary depending on what's happening in the story at any given point in time. And it's a testament to Oda's ability to keep us guessing even this late in the story. I just love that either route can work, and neither would feel like the wrong final villain, as long as they both have to go down in the end, right? And, like, neither would feel like the wrong like, it's really like there's 2 doors and Oda can go through, like, he can make either door the final option, and both would still feel organic to the flow of the story, right? That is really fucking difficult to do for a story like with as much going for it as One Piece, like that's this far in, that we still don't know the final villain, but at the same time, the two options for final villain both clearly work in the context of the story, and it just comes down, like, the author can surprise us with which one he ultimately leans into being the last one. As long as they both go down, both routes work. Casualty, thanks for the 5. I think people are underestimating how long the story has to go. I can name about 50 payoffs / dreams that we need to see. That's true, but, like, the problem with that line of thinking is that, like, we've been down this before, where we know that at the end of the day, Oda will cut things if needed for time, right? There is a sort of limit to how far he'll go. Wano I would take as the biggest example. There were so many things that, like leave me alone. Forget me. Forget my theories and speculations or whatever. Independent of me, in the community in general, there were like 50 different things that people believed still had to happen in Wano before the arc resolved. They're like, we need this. Like, what about Zoro and Shimotsuki and, like, Rima's grade and, like, yada, yada. Like, there was a million different things. And then we get to the end of Wano, and it's like, okay, well, we're actually just leaving. And none of this stuff is, like, a lot of this stuff is just going to fall to the wayside, right? At the end of the day, it's clear that Oda wanted us to be he wanted Wano to be a 150 chapter arc, which is pretty much exactly what it was. And then we were out of there 150 chapters in, right? And I personally feel like Oda wants the next stretch of Egghead and Elbaf to be another 150 chapter stretch. So I think that's partly why Egghead was about, 75-ish chapters, give or take. And I think Elbaf is going to be another 75 chapters, and then we're going to wrap around chapter 1200. So just because there is a lot of things that seem like they're necessary to the story, ultimately he tries to keep things to a certain pace. Like, again, like Dressrosa, Fishman Island. I've done videos on this in the past, but there's a pretty consistent sort of... Oda tries to do segments of his story in batches of 50, 100, or 150. You look at Punk Hazard, Fishman Island, those two together, 100 chapters, right? Dressrosa, 100 chapters. Zo Whole Cake, 100 chapters, right? Wano, 150 chapters. I think Egghead Elbaf, going to be 150 chapters. But he's generally ending these storylines at nice round numbers of, like, chapters 600 to 700, 700 to 800, 800 to 900, stuff like that. 900 to 1050, 1050 to 1200. He has a pace, actually, that he has in mind, is what it looks like. And he will ultimately cut things if they do not fit the pace that he's trying to hit. That's what it seems like to me. Right? It's obviously not a hard and fast rule. Maybe Oda, like, just to make the final saga as perfect as possible, he will stretch things. But like, if we've learned any lessons in One Piece so far, it's just that, like, just because it can feel like a lot of things are set up doesn't mean that they have to actually be addressed in the story. Sometimes he's just going to leave it out of the story and say, I'll give you the information in SBS or a Vivre card if we didn't get time for it. So, yeah, on paper it seems like there's a lot, but we've been down this road with Wano, right? We can never count on Oda covering everything that it feels like it seems like he's set up to cover. Bose Emek, thanks a lot. Rocks has Chop Chop fruit that turns out to be mythical Zoan Earth God. Rocks has the Chop Chop fruit that turns out to be mythical Zoan Earth God. Oh, shit, interesting. I just don't know if I would ever consider the Chop Chop fruit to be like cutting things to be tied to being the Earth God. It would be crazy if it turns out he has the Chop Chop fruit and the Chop Chop fruit is just, like, really, really powerful in its awakened form. That'd be really cool. It would be very, very cool. I still hope Rocks somehow has the Nika fruit. I think that'd be really sick to see. Carnage, thanks for the 2. Blackbeard crew is a Make-A-Wish version of the Rocks crew. Yeah. The Blackbeard pirates are genuinely one of the biggest things holding him back from seeming like endgame material, like final villain material. But I have a big, big, big theory about why that is and what to actually expect out of Blackbeard's crew. I've teased this theory many times. It's also tied to like what I believe the final matchups for the story are. I'll drop the theory at some point, but for the moment, no. Yeah. It's too elaborate. It would require too much explaining to really explain all here. But I think there's a reason that the Blackbeard crew is kind of shitty. Cup, thanks for the 5. In my opinion, One Piece has 3 acts. Pre-time skip, post-time skip, and final saga. Yes, I agree with you, Cup. I hard agree with you on this. I also count East Blue as kind of like prologue. So it's like prologue, act 1, act 2, and then final act. I hard agree with you on this. Pre-time skip, post-time skip, and final saga. All 3 are written differently and have different goals. New World, Yonko, and One Piece. I guess in that you mean like... Oh, I see what you're saying. Goal 1 is getting to the New World. Goal 2 is defeating the Yonko, and Goal 3 is One Piece. Yeah, I think that the writing style of pre-time skip to post-time skip is very different, but then the writing style of the final saga is also very, very different from the previous act, 2 acts. That's actually a video that I've wanted to do for some time. And the biggest thing I'd say is that I feel like Act 2, in my opinion, leaned away from a lot of the strengths of Act 1 to focus on setting up a lot of things for Act 3. But I think doing the groundwork like that sets up Act 3 to be the strongest of all the 3 acts, if Oda nails everything. So, yeah, that is a video that I want to do at some point. But I'm glad that you also observed that. Pablo Olivares, thanks a lot. I believe the Galila Giants were captured and forced to build a quote-unquote new weapon. That's why they were wearing prison uniforms when they were frozen. Ooh, that's interesting. That's a really, really fucking interesting concept. That's very interesting. I wonder if the world government secretly already has a Pluton. But then why did Spandam really need all that? I don't know. I guess you can never have enough Plutons. But still, that's a really, really cool theory. Moshe Agibogun, thanks a lot. Who from the One Piece world would you marry and why? Robin. I think Robin. Simple reasons. Intelligent, kind, very easy personality to get along with. Seems like her mind is very interesting, right? Obviously attractive. Just everything about Robin is like pretty compatible in my mind. L, thanks a lot for being a Yonko tier member for 29 months. If Blackbeard succeeds where his father didn't, then he's going to be the last villain of One Piece. I'm a die on Blackbeard final villain hill. Yeah, if he succeeds in that sense, then yes, he would be if he succeeds in taking down Emu and becoming king of the world, then yeah, he would be the final villain. I think, yeah, let me throw a poll out for you guys. Let me throw out a poll for you guys. Blackbeard or Emu final villain? Saeed Abdo says, Morge, this is the accurate translation for Estrida's older brother's box. Behind the scenes, the man who diligently cared for Loki was none other than the regent, Estrida's older brother. Gotcha. That dude, I know he's supposed to be like a shitty asshole character, but we barely saw him. You know, like I think Oda's kind of phoning it in with the child abuse on that one. Like sometimes Oda goes hard on the child abuse, you know, like he shows us a bit more. But this one is just like a throwaway line. Like, show us this shitty guy, you know? Tala, good to see you as usual. Thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 16 months. If Usopp's focus this arc stays below Zoro and Sanji and potentially Rob and Frankie, what would change on your thoughts of the crew and of Oda as an author? Jesus Christ, I fucking forget that. I always try and remember that Elbaf is supposed to be Usopp's arc, but at this point, even I've fucking forgotten. I think, okay, so I don't think it's black and white in the sense that if Usopp's focus stays below Zoro and Sanji and Robin and Frankie, would that just ruin my view of Usopp? Or of Oda as a writer, like stuff like that? I would say not necessarily, just because what matters at the end of the day is that Usopp gets significant focus. If Elbaf turns out to be a phenomenal arc for all of the Straw Hats, and it feels like it's 10 out of 10 storytelling for all of them, then I don't care if Usopp was supposed to get the most or something like that. Like, I'm not gonna be like, I'm not gonna be upset about that, right? Like, I'm not judging it relative to the other Straw Hats. I'm judging it in a vacuum. Like, is Usopp gonna get something significant this arc? Because, like, if Usopp gets, like, his best, most beautiful storyline ever here in Elbaf, and it just so happens that Oda does something even more profound for, like, Zoro and Sanji, or, like, Robin or Frankie, then I'm not going to be like, you know what, this is BS. Because, like, I don't care that I loved Usopp's storyline. It also needs to be better than every other Straw Hat storyline. I'm not going to view it like that. It's okay if other Straw Hats get even better storylines than Usopp here, as long as Usopp gets a really strong storyline. And by that, I feel like it should be something that, if we go through past Usopp arcs, I feel like the bar should be, I'd say Water 7 Enies Lobby was such a powerful storyline for Usopp, it's genuinely very, very hard to beat. I would argue that for an existing Straw Hat, right? Like, so not a not like the Straw Hats have their all have their primary storylines, like the storylines where they're like first really joining the crew, right? Like for Robin, I count hers as Water 7 Enies Lobby, even if she technically joined in Alabasta. But like, let's say their primary, their focused storyline, right? So for each Straw Hats, outside of each Straw Hat's focused storyline, they also get other storylines that still heavily focus on them, like Nami, Skypiea. Skypiea was a very important arc for Nami, right? Sanji, obviously, Whole Cake, right? Sanji's like origin primary arc was Baratier, but Whole Cake was obviously like extremely Sanji centric. I will always argue that Usopp has the best storyline for out of all of the Straw Hats non-primary storylines. So like past their origin storyline. Okay, Water 7 Enies Lobby, it's just too powerful. Like Usopp's whole storyline in that, between the falling out, like the big fight with Luffy over the Mary and everything like that, and like the emotions that raised up and everything, and Usopp's whole character arc through there, the Sogeking journey, realizing his value to the crew, and then all culminating with the big finale with Luffy and Lucci and putting his life on the line, and it ain't like it's hell here, and the whole story concluding with bringing it full circle to Luffy and Usopp. That is the best writing a Straw Hat has ever gotten outside of their primary storyline. And then wrapping up with the apology and everything was really good too. And I don't think it's particularly close. I don't expect Oda to beat that out for Usopp and Elbaf, because that whole storyline for Usopp there with Water 7 Enies Lobby, there was just so much long-term lead up to it. Like, just the simple fact that Oda planned from the get-go that like the Mary was introduced in Usopp's first storyline, right? Like, so the Mary was also had special sentimental value with Usopp. He joined the crew the same time that the Mary joined the crew, right? Like, they were tied together, and it came from Kaya and all of that stuff. And so Oda planning that the moment that the Mary needs to be left behind and the crew needs to grow and get a new ship, that is also going to be the point where, like, Usopp finally has to really grow as a character and go through this journey. Like, all of that coming together, that's very hard to replicate. I don't know if Oda can... Like, Elbaf Oda's obviously been planning for, like, the longest time, but I have a hard time genuinely believing something can match the emotional journey that Usopp had in Water 7 Enies Lobby. So I don't expect Oda to beat that bar. That's, like, too high of an expectation almost, right? It's like, you know, the best thing you ever did, beat that. That's unfair, I think. I think it should be better. Whatever Usopp gets here should be better than Dressrosa. I think Dressrosa was a strong storyline for Usopp, a very strong storyline for Usopp. It's probably the most a Straw Hat has gotten focus in a single arc post time skip outside of Sanji and Whole Cake Island. Usopp and Dressrosa would be second in terms of character focus. Dressrosa literally ends with Usopp, them making a fucking bronze statue of Usopp alongside Luffy and Kiros. Like, that's how important Usopp was, like, in that whole Dressrosa storyline. Like, he's the reason that they have the whole Straw Hat Grand Fleet. He gets the next highest bounty in the crew or whatever. Maybe not next, but, you know, very high. 5-star, whatever. God Usopp. That's where that whole, like, Usopp and Dressrosa, great stuff. The sniping chapter that Usopp has in Dressrosa is still my favorite chapter of Dressrosa, I think. Phenomenal chapter right there. I think Elbaf needs to beat that. Because it's a good arc for Usopp, a very strong arc for Usopp, but it's not, like, the most mind-blowing thing. So I think my expectations for Usopp and Elbaf, the writing, I don't expect it to reach the highs of Water 7 Enies Lobby. It would be amazing and beautiful if Oda could do that. But I think it should be stronger than something like Usopp and the Tontatas or whatever, and like and knocking out Sugar. I think that's where I'm kind of feeling like Usopp's whatever his story should fall. Okay, so that's the standard I'm hoping for. Blackbeard or emo final villain. Okay, so now the pendulum has swung back and people are leaning towards Blackbeard. I'm gonna make a little note for myself. Here we go. Blackbeard or hold on. Meek, thanks for the 5. On that line of thought, if the Galila Giants were forced to build a weapon, it's a parallel to NL forcing the priests to build Arc Maxim. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even remember NL forcing people to build the Arc Maxim. It makes sense though. It makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that is similar. Pablo Olivares, thanks a lot. I think the weapon they built was the one that Emu used in Leloucia, but they couldn't activate it without the Mother Flame. That's why they were looking for Pluton. Oh, in that case, that's interesting, because then Uranus would be something else then entirely. Although Oda seems to imply from the Revolutionary Army's dialogue that like he's trying to hint to the reader that the weapon that they have is the ancient weapon, unless that's a big red herring. Pasty Cash, thanks for the 5. Morge, who are your top 33 favorite characters in One Piece? Can we get a stream on that one day? So funnily enough, if you guys want to check out the Pirate King podcast, which is for my top tier of YouTube members or patrons, the first question, like the title of the whole podcast, is me breaking down, I break down my top 5 favorite One Piece characters in the Straw Hats and my top 5 favorite side characters. I kind of keep them separate because it's hard for me to compare Straw Hats to non-Straw Hats just due to difference in terms of focus and frequency of the character appearances. But yeah, like, so I cover, I guess, my top 10 there. So if you guys want to check out the Pirate King podcast, then definitely give it it's an hour and a half, hour and 50. This one's an hour and 15, and you get access to all previous Pirate King podcasts. And I just answer every single question very in depth that all Pirate King members ask. And I believe that's the first one on the list of this one, which is, yeah, I just go through my favorite One Piece characters. You're asking me to list my top 33 favorite characters in One Piece, and you're asking me to do a stream for that in one day. So, like, those are two different sort of requests, right? Do you want me to do it now or in a stream? I'll say maybe, let me put it down in terms of stream ideas. Top 33 favorite, I'm going to say top 30 favorite One Piece characters. I'll put it down as a stream idea. We can maybe do it at some point. Sometimes I wonder if those type of streams would be like if people would like them just for me to list, but because like we do things like arc tier lists, character tier lists and stuff like that, but that's a bit more interactive, right? It's usually like I'm trying to get input from you guys so we make a tier list together. I don't know if would you guys even like it if I just made a list of like a stream list of my top 30 favorite characters? I don't know would you guys enjoy that? New X7 says, hey, Morge, did you see the Weapons trailer? If so, what did you think? I thought it was cool. I thought it was a cool trailer. I was most excited, as you know, by the director Zach Kreger from Whitest Kids You Know, my favorite comedy sketch group growing up. That was, like, the big thing for me, so I'm probably going to watch it just for that. And my editor is a huge, like, my editor and I, we've been, we've known each other since high school. So, like, we both loved Whitest Kids You Know. Like, that was our shit. That was our favorite comedy sketch group. So I sent him that trailer literally immediately, and he was like, why'd you send me this? And I was like, check the director. He was like, oh, shit. Anyway, Really cool trailer. Maybe I'll check it out in theaters. It looks pretty good. I saw that Jordan Peele really wanted the rights to that and everything, so it seems like it's a really hyped up movie. Jay's crash out. Yes. Okay, so I saw a Twitter clip of Jay crashing out, calling out every other One Piece YouTuber, but I don't know the context of it. I just saw him saying, like, I win today, not Brago, not King, not Roger, not Morge, etc. I just saw that clip, I think, shortly before stream started. And I was like, what's the context of this? What happened? And I don't know the context. Does anyone want to fill in the context? I was like, what did I do to Jay? Anyway. Dick so small, I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5. I'm pretty sure Usopp is going to see through Loki's cold persona, but also let him know he's got to stop taking his pain out on others like Ida with Harold. Yeah, I just don't know if there's like a... at some points I was trying to think of like what little parallels could Usopp have with Loki, and like a theory that a lot of people had, not just me, but like it was a common theory that a lot of people had before Elbaf started, because we knew that Loki was the name of the Prince of the Giants, but we didn't know much else about Loki, and we saw a silhouette and he seemed like just like a random generic character. So a lot of people speculated that maybe Usopp will bond with Loki once they get to Elbaf, because in Norse mythology, Loki is like more of a cunning trickster type character rather than like a traditional brave Viking warrior like Thor, right? So people were like, maybe Loki and Usopp will bond because they're both more in the vein of like cunning trickster type warriors than the traditional, like very, brave Viking warrior ideal that Usopp's been chasing, right? So maybe that could be a connection there. But then we got to Elbaf and it turned out that Loki as a character is actually a combination of the concept of Loki and Thor from Norse mythology. That's what we basically realized. Like, he's both those elements mixed together. Like, it's Thor's strength and warrior spirit and the hammer and just like this platonic ideal of the ultimate badass warrior. But then it's also Loki, the concept of Loki from mythology invoked in the sense that like it's like the baby is different than the rest of the Norse Viking gods or whatever. He's also a trickster and he's cunning and lying, deceitful and like evil, the way that Loki's painted out to be. So it's a combination of those two ideas. And Loki's always laughing and has his tongue out and shit. And he's associated with the frost and the underworld. So Oda just meshed those characters together. He was like, I'm going to take Thor and I'm going to take Loki. I'm going to mesh them together. And I'm going to give him more like a Thor-like design, but I'm going to give him the name Loki. And that's basically what we got. So I don't really see much clear overlap between what Usopp and Loki would connect on. But that's an interesting possibility, that Usopp seeing through Loki's cold persona, but teaching him that he's got to stop taking his pain out on others. Maybe that's the way that it goes. Yeah, Usopp hasn't even met Loki yet, says 3D tables. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if Usopp's role in Elbaf just has nothing to do with Loki, and it's more to do with, like, the giants that he knows, like Dory and Brogy. Like, maybe he has to fucking defeat them or some shit. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 300 real quick, because we're almost there. P-Dog29, thanks for the 2. Loki finds the Galila giants and they have Ragnar. I love that idea. That's a really, really cool possibility, because it's like, what the fuck is Ragnar? Ragnar does not seem like Loki's Devil Fruit ability, so, like, just what is it? Is it a hammer that ate a devil fruit? Is it just a magic hammer? Is it a special weapon that the giants created? JP, thanks for the 5. Did you see that the SBS that revealed the guy with glasses on Rox's crew is Gil Baster from the Wanted one-shot? That's kind of random. I have read that one-shot. That's the gunslinger guy, right? I think that was not one of my favorites of the one-shot. I think I remember Oda's one-shots. I think my favorite was Monsters, because Monsters kind of just tells the best story. Monsters just tells the best story. And then second was Oda's funniest work ever. I strongly recommend going to read this one. It's like, I forget what it is, like The Diary of God or something like that. Or God's Gift to Mankind. It is Oda's humor at it's basically a look into like what if Oda just wanted to write comedy. It is fucking funny as fuck. And then after that, I think maybe it was, I guess, the Romance Dawn variants. I think there was 2 of them. And then I think was the Gunslinger one, which I believe is what you're talking about. And then there was one really bad one about a monk. Master Jaga, thanks for the 5. We asked this a lot, but right now, do you think Luffy finds the One Piece before or after the final war? Now, especially if Emu gets taken out in the war. It's really fucking hard to tell. Because there's too many things that go into it. Like, I now lean towards... Because there's so many arguments. Like, One Piece arguably could just be connecting the ocean, like some people think, right? Or I used to believe that. But now it's like, could One Piece be that sun that's been stolen, right? I feel like I'm leaning more and more towards everything just coming together all at once. I could see the final war being at Laugh Tale. I could see them getting the One Piece at, like, by defeating the final villain, whoever that may be, and in the process creating a new world. I think I lean towards that, but there's just so much that feels strange. Like, I don't know how it all comes together. I guess I lean towards Luffy finding the One Piece at the climax of the final war. Disaster Master, thanks to the 5. Kaido is officially the biggest fraud, dude. In one chapter, we find out that he copied Rocks and Loki. Nothing original about that man, stole everyone's flow. I mean, Kaido was always like, he's a pre-Final Saga character, right? So he's going to feel very exciting for his time, but ultimately Oda's saving all of his best shit for last, right? So, I imagine Oda drew a lot of ideas for Kaido from future characters that he's saving for the actual final act of One Piece. So it's just complicated. I don't think he's, like, the biggest fraud, but I also think that Kaido is generally overrated as a character, both in terms of strength and as a character in general. Carnage, thanks for the 5. What if Rocks killed an admiral because he was a Marine and backstabbed his subordinates similar to Blackbeard and Thatch? Ooh, that's interesting. You backstabbed his superior in this case, right? That would be interesting. That would be really interesting if Rocks started off as a Marine. I think I prefer the idea of Rocks being a king, but I think that just leads to a more interesting story, but I could easily see that being the case because it's a very similar way for the story to start up. That's an interesting concept. Tom, thanks for the 2. I hope Big Mom one-shots killing him, so no Usopp fight. Oh, shit. I really hope that doesn't happen. Although Big Mom could use some feats. I really hope that doesn't happen, though. L, thanks for the 2. Top 5 most underappreciated One Piece character stream. I don't know if I would do that, but I could label them right. I could tell you them right now. I think Whitebeard, number 1. Tom, number 2. I think Tom is a phenomenal character. Frankie's mentor. I think the problem with Tom is just that it's Frankie and Tom's story. I think Frankie has a really good backstory, actually. I think it's a great backstory. It's unfortunate. The placement is unfortunate, which is that it comes at the climax of Water 7, which segues into the true finale of the storyline, which is Act 2, which is Enies Lobby. And so the bigger one that we remember is always going to be Robin's O'Hara flashback. That's just more powerful, comes at the true climax of that whole storyline, whereas Frankie's essentially comes at around what you would call like the midpoint of the storyline, right? Like the Strawds are defeated, Robin's been taken, everyone's down in the dumps, things are at an absolute low, and then we get Frankie's backstory to basically establish like our first looks at how bad the world government is. Before then, we get on the sea train, head over to Enies Lobby to fight the world government, and that's when we get Robin's backstory to really hammer in just how bad the world government is before defeating the world government in the context of that storyline, right? So I think it's just timing. I think if Frankie got his backstory as like a centerpiece of some arc, instead of like technically it's the centerpiece of the Water 7 arc, but there's so much more going on in Water 7, and like Water 7 Enies Lobby is really one arc. It's one singular story arc. It's like all the same conflict, all the same storyline, all the same villains, all the same, like it's all one storyline. Like all that's changing is the location. It just involves a bit of travel. But that would be like saying like Onigashima is a separate arc from Wano because they had to go by boat to get to Onigashima. It just doesn't make any sense. So Water 7 Enies Lobby is really one story arc in the technical sense of how you would define story arcs. So Frankie just unfortunately, he's overshadowed by a better backstory at the climax of that story arc whereas his comes at a much earlier point where there's already a lot more shit going on. Yeah. So Tom, I think, is a phenomenal character. I love a lot of his quotes. Like, I think one of my favorite quotes in One Piece is Tom saying, like, very proudly, like, with his chest, him telling you guys might be, people who've watched my streams long enough know this, but, like, when I recall One Piece moments that are very touching to me, I have to struggle not to tear up. Okay, so I'm gonna try and, like, this doesn't sound like a moment where it would make sense to tear up, but I just really like this quote where Tom is, like, captive or whatever, and, like, being berated by Spandam and them for, like, building these weapons and everything like that. And Tom's like, you always have to accept everything that you create. And, like, they're like, do you renounce, like, or whatever, that you that wasn't a sniffle, that was, like, actually had something in my throat. But you know, like, they're talking about how he made the ship for Roger and stuff, and Tom is very proudly, like, under penalty of death and everything, he's like, I'm proud of the strength that I lent that man Roger with a dawn. For some reason, the phrasing of that whole line just feels very, very strong. Like, it just feels very, very impactful to me. I don't know. I just really, really like that moment. It's actually one of my low-key favorite moments in One Piece. It's just not one that I think of that often because people don't talk about it or reference it that much. But that's one of my favorite moments in One Piece. And he's one of my favorite characters. Anyway, continuing on. I don't want to give the rest of top 5 most underappreciated characters. It would just take too long. Patrick Malone, thanks for the 10. Emo being afraid of Joy Boy's haki gives me Blackbeard vibes. I see them as two halves of a cycle of tyranny that Luffy must break. Blackbeard as the new incarnation will be the final boss. Emo being afraid of Joy Boy does hurt Emu's status as the strongest character, or the strongest big bad final villain in a sense. But I do agree that, like, Emu is the current example of tyranny, and then Blackbeard basically reflects, like, the cycle of, like, you know, pirates dethroning a king and then becoming the king tyrant themselves. I agree. I just don't know if Luffy defeats which one in which order. Kondog Stir, thanks for joining the Yonko. Thank you very much for the support. I hope you enjoy it. Just go check out the past Yonko podcasts that accompany every video that comes out. I'm saying thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 18 months, man. I hope you enjoyed the Pirate King podcast that just came out today. Did not expect the Rocks reveal so early. I feel like Blackbeard final villain stocks did rise a bit with this. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just did the poll, and it seems like close to 60% have now swung to Blackbeard being the final villain. Very curious to see what role he plays in the Elbaf flashback and Loki's character. Yeah, Oda just keeps throwing these wrenches in the works that jerk us either way, and, like, I just love how it all feels like it's so seamless. Like, it's not like the Rocks lore is forced here. It feels like it's very important to Loki's character. That's one thing I never really liked as much about, like, Odin's role in the Roger and Whitebeard flashback. It just felt like it felt a little forced the way that Oda connected those. Like, it felt like Oda needed to tell Roger and Whitebeard lore to give us more lore context that did tie to the story of Wano. But Oda could only do that through the story of Odin, so he tied Odin into that. But Odin was basically, like, just a NPC, just an observer for most of the Roger Whitebeard part of the journey. It established that he grew stronger, he saw more of the world, and he gained context about the lore, but I never felt like it was that important to Odin's character, personally. Like, it did do stuff for his character, but not in, like, I feel like Loki's encounter with Rocks will feel more organic already, because we have a great understanding of who Loki is right now, and, like, his feelings towards the world in general, and how that could play into directly meeting with Rocks, and how that could shape him in a very meaningful and significant way, while also giving us more context on Rocks and his lore. Everything just seems a bit more organic here, whereas, like, it just felt like Oda just had to pick a character to drop onto Roger and Whitebeard's ship, and so, like, Odin's journey just took a random-ass detour for a long period of time. I don't know, and it just stopped being the Odin flashback for a while. Oh, fuck, it's frozen? Oh, my God, why the fuck does it do this shit? I'm so sick of this. Okay. Should work. Should work. Sorry about that, guys. Let me do this shit. Okay. What the fuck? This shit froze too? God damn it. Alright, hold on. Let me do it again. Maybe I just won't mess with anything too much this time. We'll just leave the settings as is. Alright. Yeah, it'll just be the settings will be what they are. Yeah, we'll just roll with that. Okay, continuing on. Dick so small I piss on my balls, thanks for the 5. Emu being in the spread for who will claim the One Piece confirms that claiming it is how you win the final war. Oda's also bluntly said One Piece found equals ending. Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards that. I think it'll be a mad rush for the One Piece. I talked about this in this last Tuesday's video, how like it really will be a battle. Like world government will be involved too. I think it is going to be a mad rush for the One Piece. That just makes the concept of the whole story tighter because it always was about getting the One Piece at the end of the day. Oda just had to move the story into a situation where like all the factions and all the setup would finally conclude around trying to get the One Piece. I am maximum stupid. Thanks for the 5. Jay's crash out was pretty much Blackbeard being top 1 and being the son of Rocks who took out an admiral. So admiral stocks down, Yonko stocks up. Lol. Okay, I mean like I'm not opposed to a lot of that. Yeah, I'm not opposed to all of that, so I guess Jay gets the W, though, because he is the Blackbeard guy. Dara Boppler, thanks to the 5. Finale, Luffy falls off Red Line. Those on Noah pray. Uranus about to kill them. Luffy gets back up with Red Dawn. Looks like Rising Sun clears the sky. That's really cool, because that's actually very, very similar to what happened with NL. Like, he got up there to fight NL, then he fell back down. He was able to come back up, clear the sky. I think that was kind of basically what happened. Sorry, let me just send one message real quick. Hold on. Okay. All right. Electric Altenio, thanks for the 5. Do you think the captured hammer giants were forced to make the giant doors between Enies Lobby and Marine Fort? Oh, that's a really good point. Maybe that's what they had to create. Yeah, because how did those doors come to be? Yeah, no, that's very interesting. The Giants are the Giants could connect a lot of pieces, but that's for another week's video. Pasty Cash, thank you for the 20. Thank you for the support. Seriously. Luffy, Zoro, Kuma, Shanks, Robin, Whitebeard, Nami, Sanji. Oh my god, you're listing all your favorites. Okay, hold on. Okay. You're listing all your favorites. Okay, here we go. So it seems like Pasty Cash's favorites are in order: Luffy, Zoro, Kuma, Shanks, Robin, Whitebeard, Nami, Sanji, Doflamingo, Sol, Rayleigh, Gaban, Garp, Kuzan, Roger, Saturn. Saturn? All right. Ace, NL, Blackbeard, Kizaru, Corazon, Sabo, The Merry, interesting, Mihawk, Ryuma, okay, Wiper, Vivi, Katakuri, Crocodile, Karu. I like the Karu pick. And only 5 Strats for fairness. Yeah, it's hard to rank Strats versus side characters because, like, some Strats are around for so fucking long, and then, like, some side characters people really like, it's like they're around for, like, 6 chapters total in the story, you know? But then they make a big impact every time they're there. Canute Worgen, thanks for the 5. I've always felt that Emu is the villain to beat for the world to see, while Blackbeard's fight would be at the end for the One Piece itself. That's an interesting possibility. Again, I just don't know the order. I don't know the order necessarily. But defeating Blackbeard for the One Piece, it feels like very piratey, you know, like this was a pirate story at the beginning of the day. Defeating Emu to free the world and bring the dawn feels like it wraps up everything very climactically. It's just fucking there's such a good argument for both. I have my own thoughts, but I'm really not like married to either possibility. But I do believe Luffy defeats both. That's the one thing that I feel is likely. I could see Blackbeard defeating Emu and taking Emu's fruit or something like that, but I still currently lean towards Luffy defeating both. The last thing I want to do real quick, before we wrap up stream is something we haven't done in a little bit. All right, here we go. Best characters in Elbaf. Let me share this real quick. I gotta add the... Hold on. I gotta add the other video source real quick. Which one was it? Was it this one? Fuck. Hold on. It's video source 2. Okay. I'm adding it. Give me a second here. There we go. All right. Yeah. Okay. Favorite characters in Elbaf. Characters who aren't Straw Hats and characters that we don't know that well before Elbaf. Shit. But do we add Rocks into this? Because Rocks is like, he's a backstory character, right? Are we adding Rocks into this shit? I don't know if he's like an Elbaf character, but then we had Shamrock. We added Shamrock in. So I guess we gotta add Rocks in. Emu doesn't count in this list. Emu doesn't count in this list. I feel like Hadruden way too low. I can move Hadruden up. Yeah, I'll move Hadruden up. Yeah, so let's start with I don't care about Rania. Let's move Rania down. Let's just put Rania there. She had her moment. Don't really care about her now. Hadruden, I'm going to go ahead and put... here? A lot of this is recency bias, because I've noticed that, like, anytime we get a chapter and, like, some character does something, I'm immediately biased towards moving that character higher. It's just the nature of week-to-week reading, you know? Like, I remember we went, like, a stretch of several weeks without seeing Loki, and then I was like, do I like Skopper Gaban better than Loki? But then we got back to Loki, and I was like, nah, I just like Loki better. Okay, I don't want to mess with these characters here. I don't know why we got Mosa here. I'm just going to get rid of Mosa. Got nothing to say about Mosa. Okay, we'll put Mosa there. So then, who do we have that's new? I think Harold. Good character. I'm liking Harold. I'm going to go ahead and put Harold here. I like Harold. Estrida, we want to put towards the bottom, right? Worst character. Estrid. And then Ida we like, so I want to put Ida somewhere high. I like Ida quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and put Ida here. We got Gunko high. We got Killingham here. Jarl, Sommers. Yeah. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave Rocks unranked for the moment till we get a bit more. Estrid's brother. That's pretty much it, right? Taptio Trevisa says Mosa is Hadruden's mom. Oh, that would be a cool reveal. That would be really cool. Yeah, I think we got this. Hadruden is very high up for Morge. Yeah, Hadruden's pretty high. Hadruden's pretty high now. Yeah. Tom says, Morge, did anyone get a prediction right? Yes. Francisco Mas did. Francisco Mas predicted that Loki would hate Hadruden because other characters love Hadruden. So Francisco Mas, if you are here in the chat, I fucking forgot. Is Francisco Mas here? Please reveal yourself. Yeah, Francisco Mas is here. Let's thank you for the reminder. Gonna make him mod real quick, and then we'll probably call the stream there. Takeover Toby says, who do you think is the strongest father and son duo? Dragon and Luffy. No, Garp and Dragon. Yeah, Garp and Dragon. Yeah, I think Garp and Dragon. Like prime, like you're saying if they're all in their prime, right? Prime Garp, Prime Dragon, I think is the strongest father-son duo. Because like Luffy hasn't reached his prime yet, Blackbeard hasn't reached his prime yet. Characters like Ace died before they could reach their prime. Figarland, Garling, we don't have enough context yet to really give a guess. So I think Garp is a character that we know was like scales to closely roughly prime Roger level, like maybe a hair below or maybe exactly equal, we don't know. But he scales to about there. And then on top of that, Dragon is a character that we know is like probably like top 3-4 strongest characters today. Yeah. Digest, thanks for the 2. Luffy versus Blackbeard will mirror the Ace versus Blackbeard ending. But with Luffy actually winning with a big attack, I could definitely see that. Definitely could see that. Yeah, if you count the Garling twins, then sure. Then the Garling twins win. Because then it's like 2 characters instead of just 1. But yeah, I think at the moment I would say the Monkey D family's looking pretty strong. Now, if everyone was allowed to reach their potential, then suddenly it's like a whole different conversation. Then it's like, then you got to talk about, like, we'll never know what prime peak potential Ace would look like. But Roger Ace would obviously have like a tremendous argument. Rocks Blackbeard possibly as well. But we have no idea. All right, everybody. I think we're going to call it here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was a phenomenal chapter, obviously, and this is just shaping up to be like a crazy fucking good flashback. Like, I could not be more excited. And we got no break next week. So that's really, really good news, too. So we're just going to be on a roll. So, yeah, with that, I will talk to you all next week. And I got a big video on Rocks coming out this Tuesday, so watch out for